It was at 7:40 p.m. on the 23rd of May 1935 that a Miss Clark called at the caretaker's office at the University of Adelaide on North Terrace and asked where a Workers' Educational Association lecture was being held. Informed that it was in a room in the basement at the rear of the university building, the young student thanked the caretaker, Mr. Conroy, and proceeded around the building. Within a minute or two she came running back and informed Conroy and the assistant registrar, a Mr. Bampton, that there was a man laying on the concrete path, gravely injured. Conroy and Bampton hurried around to the eastern side of the university building, later renamed the Mitchell Building in 1961, and saw the man. He was laying face down with his head toward the building, which was about 15 feet away, and his feet in the gutter between the path and a curving driveway. His head rested on the upper part of his left arm, while the right one was doubled up under the body. The location where the man lay was well illuminated by an electric light, and upon reaching him the pair discovered that it was the university's Professor of Economics, Professor Edward Owen Giblin Shan. 30 feet above was an open window through which the man had fallen. The sills of the window were about 3.5 feet high and steeply angled inside and outside. An ambulance had been called, and as it arrived, so did a Dr. Funder. Shan had a pulse, but it was very weak. He was placed aboard the ambulance, which took only a minute to reach the nearby Adelaide hospital, but by the time they arrived, Shan was already dead from a severely fractured skull. Shan had been wearing a wristwatch when he fell. The strap was still attached to his wrist, but part of the mechanism was about 3 feet away from his head, closer to the building, while the dial was found 3 feet to the north of him. The hands had stopped at the moment the watch was broken. They read 7:35. Edward Shan had been born in Tasmania on the 30th of April 1884, the son of a schoolmaster. He excelled as a student and went to Melbourne University, where he won scholarships in 1901 and 1904. He graduated with an MA in 1904. He began lecturing at Melbourne in 1905, but in 1906 arrived at Adelaide University as Professor of Philosophy at the age of 22. Later he cryptically referred to 1906 as his Adelaide setback, though in what way nobody seems to know. He returned to Melbourne University after a year in Adelaide and remained until 1908. He then went to England and studied further at the London School of Economics, during which he was introduced to leading Fabian Society members, including George Bernard Shaw, and was influenced by their socialist views. In 1910 he was offered a professorship at the Imperial University of Peking, but elected to return home to Australia. He taught history and economics at the University of Brisbane from 1911 to 1912, before being chosen as one of the foundation professors at the University of Western Australia, where he remained until 1934, before taking up his role at the University of Adelaide. Shan was considered the preeminent economist in Australia at the time, and advised the Bank of New South Wales from 1931 to 1933, and helped the Australian government develop policies to help mitigate the Great Depression in the 1930s. Australia's Prime Minister, Joe Lyons, paid tribute to Shan upon receiving the news of his passing. Shan married Alice Eddy in Melbourne in December of 1911. The couple had 3 daughters. Outside of his work and family, his greatest passion was golf. As a member of the Perth Golf Club, he studied greenskeeping in order to assist in development of the course. On the day he died, Shan gave a lecture that evening between 6:15 and 7:15 p.m. in the Prince of Wales Room. Usually he would stand with one foot resting on a chair when delivering his talks, but that night he asked his students if they would mind if he sat to give the lecture, which they of course assented to. It was the final lecture for the first term and was given in his normal, dry but somewhat humorous manner. He had made a couple of jokes which had raised laughter from the students. One of those students, John Stokes, said he thought Shan looked ill or tired, But another student didn't notice anything obviously wrong with the professor and thought he had only sat down so that a diagram on the blackboard could be seen. It was revealed after the death of Shan that he had confided to Sir William Mitchell, the Vice-Chancellor of the University, that he had felt giddy after lectures and felt that a change of air would keep him right. He had then gone to his office, which was a 2-minute walk. Nobody had seen him during the last 20 minutes he spent in the building. He had arranged some of his papers on a desk, while others he put in a case next to his hat, giving the impression that he was ready to leave for the night. After Shan had finished his lecture, a man in a grey suit called at the lecture theatre and inquired about him. An assistant caretaker named Worrell said that Shan had probably returned to his room. Asked about this person later, Worrell said he didn't recognise the man, and he didn't know if he had gone to seek out the professor or not. A class was proceeding near Shan's office at the time, but nothing unusual was heard by anyone. Police were keen to speak to John Lanoz, Shan's teaching assistant, but had difficulty in locating him. An appeal was even broadcast over radio. Lanoz, who was 24 and a Rhodes Scholar, had also recently arrived at the university from Western Australia and had spent the evening with friends and went to the university at about midnight. He could offer no information other than that Shan had seemed perfectly normal during the day. A police report was completed in a day, deciding that there was no evidence of foul play, despite the man asking for Shan not being identified or questioned. They had found some pennies on the floor of the room from which Shan fell, but no suicide note. The coroner decreed no inquest was necessary, and a finding of suicide handed down. After this finding was made, it was revealed that Shan had fainted and almost fallen out of a window at least once before. He had jammed his finger between two blackboards and had opened a window to get some fresh air when he slumped on the ledge and had to be hauled back into the room, where he quickly recovered. Lanoz was quite shaken and believed it was suicide. Even Shan's family were not sure what to believe. The following day, the university was closed as a mark of respect, and on the 25th of May, 1935, the funeral left from the university, travelling along North Terrace and West Terrace to the cemetery for cremation. As a suspected suicide, the Church of England refused to allow a service, so Professor Portis, who was a lay preacher, gave the obituary to an estimated 300 mourners. The following month, Shan's widow and his two youngest daughters left Adelaide to return to Perth to live. A sundial was placed in the sunken garden at the University of Western Australia in memorial to Shan in 1937, and an annual lecture instituted. In an article published in the History of Economics Review in 2005, it was claimed the mystery man was identified later as a schoolteacher and part-time student named Raymond Verrill, who had missed the lecture but had an essay to hand in. Verrill allegedly spoke not to Mr. Worrell but to Mr. Conroy, and had then gone to Shan's room, where Shan seemed in good spirits. According to Verrill, Shan was seen walking into the room from which he fell when he left. This room was used by John Lanoz, and a pile of student essays was found neatly stacked on the desk there. The only oddity were 2 pens on the floor, but there was no mention of the coins in the 2005 article. It would appear that this Raymond Verrill is the same teacher who was sent to jail for 2 months in 1945 for indecently exposing himself in a North Adelaide street on 2 separate days in September 1944. Although an accidental fall during a medical episode seems the most likely cause of his death, the rushed investigation and surprising finding of suicide by the coroner leaves a question mark hanging over the events of the evening of the 23rd of May. Did the professor fall, or was he pushed into the dark corners of history?